Hi everyone, Shamari here with SWHR Consulting, and today I'm going to give you 5 quick tips on training your individuals when they start with your company. So in my last video, I talked about the importance of onboarding your employee and what are some of the things that you should do when you do onboard your employee so that they have a great experience during onboarding. So in this video, I'm going to talk about training those individuals once they're part of your organization. I think this is one of those things that tend to be skipped during the onboarding process, because a lot of times you just throw people within a position and the expectation is to either sink or swim, right? So I'm not saying that that is always a bad thing, but it's not always the best experience for the employee. Most employee wants to go through some type of training program so that they feel comfortable knowing that they are understanding what they're supposed to do in the position. They understand their role. They understand how to essentially be successful in the position because they are able to take the time to train within that role. So before I dive into those tips on how to create a training program and what you should be doing within that training program, I'm going to give you a few stats to kind of be aware of if you don't have a training program in place. So one of those stats are over 20% of workers tend to leave their organization that does not have training in place within 45 days of hire. So with that being said, what that means is the employee is not happy. They might have been excited because you might have had a great onboarding program, but then once it came time for training, it wasn't so great. So you want to be able to have a training program in place so that that ultimately reduces your turnover rate, which is the next thing. It's about 16 to 20% of cost as it pertains to turnover. So it's really is cheaper to keep them. And what that means is if you create a training program that allows for people to be successful within your organization, then they feel better about their job performance, their success within your organization. So ultimately, you won't have a high turnover rate and you won't have to spend a lot of money on hiring new people every month. So it's about an average of $4,000 or so per hire. If you take that into consideration and the cost being associated with that, you may want to rethink how you onboard or how you train someone within your organization. Employees are more likely to stay within a company, about 69%, if they go through a structured onboarding and training program, and they tend to stay for about 3 years. So again, that gives you a really good idea that people love to come into an organization knowing that they're going to be trained and they feel much more successful in their role and their abilities to perform the position if they're trained. So just those are some things to just consider. Onboarding programs really do help with retention overall, about 25%, and it also helps with employee performance, so about 11%. So if you take that again into consideration, the more they're trained, better they feel about their job performance in the role, ultimately reduces turnover and increases retention. So again, it's really important to do training within your organization. It takes about 8 to 12 months for someone coming into your organization to actually understand what they're doing. 15% of employees said that the lack of effective onboarding programs and training ultimately leads to them quitting. So again, it's so important to train. I know that I've been in positions where I was just thrown into the wolves or sink and swim, as they say, and I was able to get through it, but again, it wasn't the best experience. So you want to consider how your employee might feel in that situation, how you would feel if you were put into a situation where you just have to dive into it. Even though you may have the ability or you're a quick learner like I was, it's still not the best experience because you want to make sure that you're set up for success. And so you should, do the same thing for an employee coming into your organization. So it's something to consider. So I'm going to give you about 5 quick tips on just what to think about when you are bringing in a new person after the onboarding process and what that should look like when it comes to training. So the first thing that needs to happen is you need to create and develop a solid new hire training program. But before you can even do that, you need to know what you're going to train on. And so most times companies don't want to take the time, or it's costly up front to put together a training program. But every position within your organization is important because that helps to get the job done. So you want to look at training programs for every position within your company. I know that might be a challenge, but ultimately that really is the reality of it. When someone comes into your company, the goal is for them to be able to go into that job function, have the adequate training so that they can dive right in and be able to be successful within the role. So creating SOPs are super important. If you don't necessarily have the resources to have someone sit with an individual to train every day, at least put together a standard operating procedure document that they can follow, that they can look at, and it provide them with step-by-step on how to actually do the job that they were hired for. So putting together some type of training program is important for the success of your new hire. That includes identifying what those tasks are going to be. And as I mentioned, creating a step-by-step process, utilizing a task-based approach so that they know what the tasks are and what the steps are to be able to complete that task. So putting together the program along with what those tasks are for them to complete is super important. As I mentioned before, if you don't have someone to train, which is ideal, you want to have somebody that they can job shadow, that can be some sort of mentor to them, that they can essentially learn from in terms of, the position. I would recommend it being somebody that have been in that position before, that they can, help to train. So you want to identify the best person to help with training, so that again that person can feel a little bit of comfortability because they know that person's been there in that position and that they will be able to support them and provide them with the appropriate guidance and how to be successful in that role. So really having someone available to do training is super important. Tip number 3, have resources available. I already mentioned to you being able to have an SOP available. It's so important to have something just to reference, whether it is a single piece of document that has step 1, step 2, step 3, something to keep them going, something for them to reference is important. Other resources can be, the tools that they utilize. So having the appropriate tools or systems that can allow them to be successful, and of course train them on those tools as well. Don't leave them to figure it out, because if they break something, then you'll be mad at them for breaking something within your system. So again, having the tools, having the resources available to help them with their training is super important. Tip number 4. So determine the needs of training. There can be different modes of training, whether it's again on-the-job training, or if it's online training, or if it's practical hands-on like I mentioned already. Figure out what's the best way that you want to deliver the training depending on your organization. So some companies prefer online based training. They can look at all of the training in modules, they can complete them, they can do a test after that, and that's their way of getting through training. Other types of companies will probably do more hands-on, depending if it's maybe a trade companies, if it's doing carpentry, for example. I think that's more of a hands-on approach. So how do you build a cabinet? What that actually looks like. You need to touch and feel the materials in order to build it. So looking at your company and the type of services that you offer, or whatever it is, figure out what is the best mode of training that individual for success. And tip number 5 is train to your culture. It's not just about practical training. You want somebody that's going to gel with your company. So when you do make that selection, of course, that's something that you consider in the beginning is, are they going to be a culture fit? So that includes how you train them as well. Are they going to be culturally able to accept the type of training methods that your company might have, and not just focusing on the practical aspect or the technical aspect of the position, because you need both in order for them to be successful. They got to fit in and they got to be able to do the technical piece of the position as well. So I would say train for culture, and as well for practical knowledge or technical knowledge for the actual position. And then tip number 6 is check for understanding. A lot of time companies might train, but they may not go back and ask, hey, did you understand this? Do you get it? Do I need to test you? Is there some type of exam that needs to be done? Whatever you decide in regards to checking their knowledge, it's important. So I would say to make sure that you do or have some type of knowledge base kind of checklist at the end to just make sure that they did capture the information, they do understand what they're supposed to do within the position, and they are set up for success. So those are all the tips that I have for you today. Again, my name is Shamara Walker with SWHR Consulting. You can find us on all the social media from Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. If you have any additional questions on training and the importance of training, you can always reach out to us at swhrconsulting.com, as well as give us a call at 702-979-2119. Again, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you again. Have a great one. Bye.